Jeffrey Dahmer, nicknamed the Milwaukee Cannibal, still chills the blood. The maniac has firmly taken his place in the list of objects of research in psychiatry and forensics, not to mention the fact that the image of the killer is mercilessly exploited by cinema. Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer was born in May 1960 in Milwaukee. Since childhood, Dahmer developed a craving for dead animals. He collected corpses or body parts and stored them at home in bottles with formaldehyde, which he took from his father, and arranged in animal cemetery in the backyard. Experts were perplexed why his parents, if not scared, then at least not worried that their son stored animal corpses in formaldehyde or dissected them. Moreover, they should have paid close attention to Jeffrey when he began to carry around a photo of a motorcyclist who died in an accident and go to his grave. Dahmer committed his first murder at the age of 18, on June 18, 1978, a few weeks after finishing school, when Jeffrey was left to his own devices and was the sole master of the house. Having met 18-year-old hitchhiker Stephen Hicks on the street, he invited him over. The two of them drank beer, smoked marijuana and, according to some sources, engaged in anal and oral sex. When Hicks wanted to leave a few hours later, Dahmer knocked him out with a dumbbell blow to the head and strangled him, then dismembered the body, put the pieces in garbage bags and drove into the woods, where he scattered the bags at a large distance from each other. He wrapped the victim's head in several layers of plastic wrap and kept it in the refrigerator. On September 15, 1987, Dahmer killed his second victim, 25-year-old Stephen Twomey, in a hotel room at the Ambassador Hotel. He later did not remember exactly how the murder took place. He met Twomey in a gay bar, where they both drank heavily, and then went to the hotel and rented a room. In the morning, Dahmer found Twomey dead in bed next to him, and, placing the body in a suitcase, took it by taxi to his grandmother's house, where he carried out a series of sexual manipulations with it, after which he took it to the basement. A week later, he dismembered the body and threw the remains in the trash. Not a single fragment of Twomey's body was ever found. Dahmer developed a tactic for finding victims. He met them in bars, often the Milwaukee Club 219, and offered to pose naked. When the victims came to his home, Dahmer offered them drugs, performed intimate acts, and then strangled them. Over time, he developed necrosadistic and necrophilic inclinations. He performed intimate acts with mutilated corpses and made fetishes from their parts. As a rule, his victims were representatives of sexual minorities. Dahmer wanted his lovers to be obedient to him like zombies. To this end, he experimented on some of them while they were still alive. He performed primitive lobotomies, drilling holes in the skull with an electric drill and acid. In the first months of 1988, Dahmer killed 2 more people at his grandmother's house. All the other murders followed approximately the same pattern with minor variations. There were, of course, various innovations. For example, Jeffrey liked to listen to the heartbeat and stomach rumble of some of his victims. There were cases when he cut out the liver, heart, cut off various parts of the legs, put them in plastic bags, put them in the refrigerator for a while, and then ate them. On September 25, 1988, he moved to Milwaukee, to an apartment on North 24th Street. The next day, he met a 13-year-old Laotian boy named Anukan, some sources say Kaysen, synthesumphone, brought him to his home, took photographs, then began to fondle him, and then gave him alcohol and sleeping pills. Despite the large dose, synthesumphone was able to escape and tell his parents what had happened. In the morning, Dahmer was charged with sexual assault and was released on bail pending trial. Police reviewed his records and discovered that Dahmer had 2 previous convictions for indecent exposure, so he was examined by 3 psychiatrists who concluded that he was an alcoholic and lacked the motivation to recover. At trial, Dahmer admitted taking erotic photographs of the minor, but denied any sexual relations or intentional use of sleeping pills, and stated that the boy appeared older than his age. Prosecutor Jim Edmonds had asked for 5 years in prison, but the court sentenced Dahmer to only 1 year in a correctional facility. He was allowed to go to work during the day and spend nights in a cell, and 5 years of probation. He was released home after 10 months. In February 1989, while still on trial, Dahmer killed a black 24-year-old aspiring fashion model, Anthony Sears, leaving his head and male genitalia as a souvenir. On May 14, 1990, Dahmer moved into apartment 213 at 924 North 25th Street. By the end of the year, he had killed 4 people, and in the first months of 1991, 3 more. On May 27, 1991, 14-year-old Laotian Konarak Synthesumphone, brother of Anukan Synthesumphone, whom Dahmer had brought home the day before, was able to escape from the apartment. The naked and bloodied young man, who was under the influence of drugs, was discovered by 2 young women, who called the police. When the police arrived at the scene, Dahmer convinced them that there was a quarrel between 2 lovers and that police intervention was not required. The police escorted Dahmer and Synthesumphone back to the apartment and left. At the same time, they smelled an unpleasant odor, which, as it later turned out, was emanating from the decomposing body of Tony Hughes, who was killed on May 24, but did not pay attention to it. That same day, Synthesumphone was killed and dismembered. After Dahmer's arrest, police officers John Balcerzak and Joseph Gabrish, who returned Konarak to him, were dismissed from service. Dahmer committed his last murders with a frequency of approximately once a week, June 30, July 5, 15 and 19. His last, 17th, victim was 25-year-old Joseph Braidhoft. On July 15, Dahmer was fired from the chocolate factory for absenteeism. On July 22, 1991, Dahmer invited Tracy Edwards to his place. When Dahmer tried to handcuff him, Edwards broke free and ran outside with the handcuffs hanging from his left hand. He attracted the attention of 2 police officers, who decided to go up to Dahmer. In the apartment, the police found photographs of dismembered corpses and fragments of human bodies. 3 heads, a human heart, and other entrails were found in the refrigerator. In the toilet, Dahmer kept a saucepan with hands and a penis, 2 skulls, containers with alcohol, chloroform, and formalin, and jars with male genitalia. Skulls and hands were found in a cupboard, in a nightstand, and in boxes. A human skeleton, scalp, and genitals were found in the closet. Dahmer kept 3 human torsos in a 57-gallon drum of acid. In total, Dahmer confessed to 17 murders, including the 1978 murder of Hicks. On July 25, 1991, he was charged with 4 counts of premeditated murder and bail was set at $1 million. On August 6, charges were added for 8 more murders and bail was raised to $5 million. Finally, on August 22, the number of charges was increased to 15. There was insufficient evidence to charge another Milwaukee murder, and the Hicks trial was to be held later in Ohio, where it was committed. The trial began on January 22, 1992. During the trial, increased security measures were taken, metal detectors, service dogs to search for explosives, and Dahmer was behind bulletproof glass in the courtroom. Dahmer's lawyer was Gerald Boyle, who had previously defended him in the case of harassment of Anukan Synthesumphone. Of the 100 seats in the courtroom, 23 were reserved for journalists, 34 for family members of Dahmer's victims, and 43 for spectators. The defense argued that Dahmer had indeed committed all the murders he was accused of, but that he was mentally ill and therefore could not be held responsible for them. During the trial, Boyle described the murders and sexual perversions in detail, trying to convince the jury that they could not have been committed by a healthy person. Psychiatrists for both the prosecution and defense agreed that Dahmer suffered from necrophilia, but disagreed on whether necrophilia could be grounds for exemption from criminal liability. Prosecutor McCann proved during the trial that Dahmer understood the illegality of his actions, was able to control his actions both in everyday life and when committing murders, and that the murders themselves were planned in advance. On February 15, 1992, after deliberating for 5 hours, the jury found Jeffrey Dahmer sane and guilty on all 15 counts and sentenced him to 15 life sentences, which technically amounted to 957 years in prison. Wisconsin does not have the death penalty. In his final statement, Dahmer said that he was deeply remorseful and asked for death rather than leniency. The Dahmer trial was the most expensive in Milwaukee history and attracted widespread media attention. Much attention was paid to the social aspects. On November 28, 1994, Jeffrey Dahmer and another inmate, Jess Anderson, were bludgeoned to death in a prison shower by Christopher Scarver, who was serving time for double murder. There were no signs of self-defense on Jeffrey's body, and all the blows were aimed directly at the head.